Aviation faces a sobering reality. Our carbon budget is rapidly depleting and could be exhausted by 2032. This isn't speculation, this is a carbon countdown. In our new book, Sustainability in the Air, Volume 2, Dirk Singer and I document how dramatically the landscape has transformed since our first book came out 18 months ago. We've witnessed a shift from bold experimentation to disciplined execution. What makes this book essential? We reveal how sustainable solutions succeed not because they are green, but because they are better, economically superior. The winners aren't those with the most advanced technology. They are those solving the right problems with compelling economic advantages. From SAF production and contrail mitigation to direct air capture, we have distilled hard-won lessons into a practical roadmap for aviation's journey to net zero. Get your copy today. Link in the show notes.
JetZero is providing a solution, right? If we're lowering the fuel burn by 50%, that means that our plane can be a place that absorbs the input of SAF. And there's different ways, but some people look at it and say, oh, well, we'll just put SAF on your plane because then we're flying expensive SAF twice as many miles. The other way to look at it is people say, well, you're getting the 50%. Now we'll deploy SAF on the tube and wings where we're not getting 50%.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. My guest today is Tom O'Leary, co-founder and CEO of JetZero. JetZero is pioneering the next revolution in aviation with their blended wing-body aircraft design that promises to reduce fuel consumption and emissions by up to 50%. What makes JetZero particularly fascinating is their practical approach, using existing engines and working closely with both military partners and commercial airlines like Alaska, Delta, and United. Tom brings a unique perspective from his early days at Tesla, where he witnessed firsthand how disruptive technology can transform an entire industry. Enjoy this conversation as Tom takes us inside the cabin of the future and shares his vision for aviation's transformative next chapter. JetZero and Tom are of course mentioned in our latest book, Sustainability in the Air, Volume 2. Tom, welcome to the podcast. It is fantastic to be speaking again. You are, of course, featured in our new book, Sustainability in the Air, Volume 2. JetZero is literally reshaping the future of aviation. How are you doing this?
Well, that is our mission. It is to reshape commercial aviation by bringing the first all-wing jet to market. And that will begin a transition where, by 2050, we project that all big planes will be all-wing. And the reason for that is it's aerodynamic efficiency from the beginning, right? You take the four forces of flight: lift, weight, drag, and thrust, and you get a whole span lifting body, lower weight through carbon composites. You're minimizing the drag with wingspan and lower wetted area, and you have when it comes time to the thrust component, instead of using a brand new engine, which is where we've derived most of the fuel burn savings and emission advancements from, we go to a single aisle size engine on a new mid-market size plane. So all of those things together allow us to reduce the fuel burn and the emissions by up to 50%, depending on which plane we're comparing against. So but it's really based on 30% better aerodynamic efficiency. When you have that efficiency benefit, that means that for by the time you get through the developmental phase, it's hard to compete against 30% aerodynamic efficiency benefit. So eventually, all planes will be all wing. That's the way the future looks.
Wow, I love the vision, but for anyone who's not aware, the blended wing body plane, the BWB, is not new. I believe you're claiming up to 50% reduction in fuel burn. What took it so long? Why isn't this already mainstream if it is so good?
Well, I mean, really, there's just no incentive for a couple of manufacturers to, with order banks that stretch out from 5 to 10 years. That's like the innovator's dilemma par excellence. That's the number one impediment, right? It's like, what is the pace of innovation going to be if your order bank is secure for 5 to 10 years? So that's fine and dandy, and we respect where they are in the market. It's incumbent upon the entrepreneurial innovation types to come in and to absorb the risk that it takes to bring something new to market, right? Because, as a leader of a small company that's doing amazing things, everybody's here for the mission. They're down for the mission. If you have a great big company with, all that goes into that, 100,000 employees and a market cap and quarterly earnings to report, et cetera, it becomes a very risk averse thing. So even when you get this incredible new technology that absolutely unlocks all the impediments to growth, that technology still has a hard time finding its way into a market that is risk averse. But I mean, this is the thing that we need to focus on. When we talk about the future, when we talk about the future of commercial aviation, which has grown about 4% compound annual growth rate over the past 25 years, which would, if we do that same growth rate as the incumbents project, their forecasts say we're going to double between, around 2045, certainly before 2050. On that same time scale, we're going to decarbonize, and we're going to do it without any new airframe technology coming to the market. That discrepancy, it's not happening. Like, we're not going to both continue to grow at double and get to net zero if we don't have new airframes, because there's just too much of a benefit, and there's too many obstacles and hurdles to accomplish that.
Wow, this is such deep insights, right, into the dynamics of the industry. You're right. I fully agree that a duopoly or an oligopoly is not necessarily great for innovation. So you need an outsider to come shake things up. I believe you have a 2030 targeted entry into service. What are some of the major milestones you need to hit between now and then?
Sure, yeah, you just have to go one step at a time, right? That's just how you do any development program. So for us, the milestones are scale, model, build, and test, which informs flight controls, right? When you have an airframe, I mean, the beauty of the plan is that to de-risk the program, we're using the supply base is already certified equipment. So that's a great step. So what are then you innovating what's the key innovation? The key enabling technology is the airframe itself. How do you enable an airframe? You need structures, flight controls, right? So for us, we have to do scale models, and then the path takes us to a full scale prototype that will fly in 2027. Past that, you begin your parallel path with certification along that way. So then there's the factory, you build a conforming aircraft, you certify that aircraft, and you enter into service. That's a lot to do, and that puts us on a path to put out this aircraft in the early 2030s.
Now, this is, of course, new to many people who don't see aircraft getting certified every other year, but you were previously at Tesla. Are there certain lessons that you can bring from your time at Tesla, seeing the Model S, the Model Y, all of these great cars getting rolled out successfully?
Yeah, when I was at Tesla, this was 2006, 7, 8, right? And so that at that point, Tesla was exactly the same size as we at JetZero are today. So that's kind of the stage in the development. And so the first thing that gives you is a whole lot of belief that this kind of scaling of a company, that it can be done. It's just like, is aerospace different than automotive manufacturing? Sure. I've been aerospace for 10 years now. And obviously I've learned a lot about all those differences. But the belief that you can take a new technology that is in demand and create, in Tesla's case, the best-selling car in the world. Not this year, unfortunately. It looks like their sales are going to be a little bit off. But the last few years, they were, the Model Y, they were producing the number one selling car in the world, and that was just 10 years after putting the first, Model S. The Roadster was really more of a proof of concept, right? There's only a couple thousand of those sold, I think, all time. So from the Model S launch, 2012, until really like 2021, 22, all of a sudden you went from no cars to number one selling. That's huge. So belief is the number one thing. Like everybody on our team, that's all about belief. The second thing, though, is people like to say that Tesla is a vertically integrated company. And they are. But that was not the original strategy. The original strategy was to work with the automotive supply chain to source a lot of the parts. Remember, the Tesla Roadster was battery, motor, inverter, power electronics, drive controls. Like that was it. Everything else was coming from Lotus. What happened was working with the automotive supply chain was very difficult. And they didn't believe in Tesla. They didn't believe in the disruption. That forced Tesla into be vertically integrated. What's different about JetZero is when we first went to the supply base, they're like, well, there's a lot of things happening in aerospace. We're not so sure. Then when the Air Force said, this is interesting, twice the capability from a tanker transport, we want to see this built at full scale. We want a proof of concept. Every supplier is built for dual use. They have two sides. They have the military side and the passenger, commercial side. So we went to those folks and said, well, the Air Force is here. They're like, okay, we have to take this seriously because the Air Force takes it seriously. Then we were able to effectively have the top tier one suppliers say, okay, we get it now. This is dual use. This is not a military jet. It's a commercial jet, but we're proving out the commercial side before the military can say, oh, I would use that as a derivative. So we found this sort of like zigzag path in a straight line, right? Towards the goal. And that was different, but it was informed by all of those key choices and decisions. It's not that you're looking at Tesla and saying, oh, okay, we just copy that. No, you have to adapt to the differences in the market that you're in, but you learn a lot.
You mentioned the military. I think this is a very important aspect, a common aspect we've seen amongst successful OEMs, makers of aircraft. You take Embraer, which has a very successful military program, to, of course, Boeing and Airbus as well. How important is working with the military, especially in this new environment, to you in ensuring commercial success?
Well, actually, the whole jet age started with the military, right? Because it was the tanker that became the 717. And the 717 really became the 737, right? It still carries the cockpit section of the 717 carried forward to the 737 that is still flying as new aircraft today. Even the MAX has that same 717, right? So the military is huge from proof of concept. But I already mentioned, like, first is, dual use is something that investors, like venture investment, is an important part of what we need to do to bring a disruptive technology to play. So investors are very keen right now on dual use. I mentioned the part about the way the supply chain is set up. So being able to go in through the military door and have people say, but I think there's another piece too, which is for our demonstrator, our full scale demonstrator, it gives us a client and they have 20 people plus. It's really more like 30 people when you consider that we have 7 people from NASA that they seconded into the program. So we have about 30 people who come to every design review, which started as quarterly, then it
Wow.
became bi-monthly, and now it's every 6 weeks. So every 6 weeks we do a design review, and they all come out and our engineering team, and they basically say, "Here's where we're going," because what they want to see is they want to see velocity, not just velocity, but momentum, right? They want to see velocity, mass pointed in a given direction, and progress towards that. The direction is the key, right? They want to see progress to the goal, not just activity, but, are you progressing towards the goal? How that, having that customer and having those customer readouts and that customer oversight, the effect that that has on the ordering function and the progress that your team makes is unbelievable. Think of how exciting it is for engineers to come to a new company with a new mission, a great big bold vision, and then to be able to say, every 6 weeks, NASA and the Air Force come in and review my work.
Wow.
It's not. It's
Super exciting.
daunting. It's daunting, but it's also from an engineer's perspective.
Yeah.
It's like they get to go home and talk to their spouse or significant other and say, I reviewed my work with NASA and the Air Force
Right.
today. Like
Right.
that just is a feeling of importance and greatness that is such a great motivator to the team. So there's even a lot more intangibles, but I think that's a good.
No, thank you. Thank you for diving in. There's one more part which excites me about JetZero. It's not just the dual use, but it's the fact that you've got the most important external component of the airplane logged in, which is the engine. A lot of OEMs, we've seen new plane manufacturers struggle to work with major engine manufacturers, yet you've got Pratt& Whitney logged in with, I believe, no new product development needed. Correct me if I'm wrong. How important is that engine decision in the development of the aircraft?
Well, the engine decision has been rendered for the demonstrator, and that part is really good because what we have with Pratt and Whitney there is they are providing the PW2000 and integration, right? Because it's really all of RTX, right? It's the engine. We're working with Collins on nacelles. We're working with Pratt Canada on the APU, and that was the announcement that we just made. I think what's really interesting about that is that we have airline partners who are in a working group, some of which have made investments and orders with JetZero. And then that's on the demand side. But there's also on the supply side, we have, you know, really RTX is probably the biggest supplier in the world. And they're here to support. So that's a great big thing. But as far as the engine goes, it's the goal is to use an existing engine with as little modification as possible. The beauty of the PW2000 was it had the perfect thrust profile, which is really what we're after. We need the right thrust to get to the right initial cruise altitude and to be able to cruise at the right altitude. And it turns out that lower bypass, a little bit older engine actually has the ideal thrust profile. And because this plane has naturally more lift and it wants to fly at a higher altitude, it's not so the plane itself. I talk about it like it's a person. It's not so interested in having that high bypass ratio. It doesn't really help you
Right.
at altitude. It's more for like how do you swim through the thicker air at 28 to 34,000 feet.
Very nice. I'm glad you're checking all the boxes one by one by one. The experience comes in, right? There are two things that also stand out for me. One is the profile of your advisors who you have on the board. You've got everyone from Rob Dewar, who I've had the incredible pleasure of working with back when he was launching the C series, to Mary Ellen Jones, to the original founders and designers, inventors of the blended wing wide body design. Why is this
Yeah.
so important?
Well, let me name a few more because they are absolutely the guardrails of this business, right? It's like sometimes people have asked me, like, you've been in aerospace for 10 years, but you're running the most important and disruptive, like this future solution that's going to help the industry retain its growth potential. How did you come to this place and position, and how are you doing this? And the answer is this advisory board is Brian Barents, who used to run Lear, and Brian Moss, who used to run Gulfstream and Bombardier prior to that, and was actually basically the pioneer. If there's any pioneer of the business jet space, it was Brian Moss, having done it at Lockheed and then Bombardier and then Gulfstream, launching, probably the most successful launch this century of any aircraft. Although Rob Dewar and he might argue about that, but the G650, and the chief engineer on that program was Press Henny, who's also an advisor. Just a juggernaut of a program. Those folks, and then there's Barry Eccleston, who ran Airbus North America, Marion Jones, you mentioned, we call her Medj, and Warren Willits at Jetstar. Nina, who used to run, Nina Johnson ran Fleet acquisitions for United, Air France KLM, and just a veteran of that particular side of the business. Gosh, I hope I'm not forgetting any of them, but you can see where it makes it so easy for me to have these guardrails of basically like, how do you stay on track and focused on the goal, and how do you keep I think of that, and I always tell them, I'm like, guys, you're here to make sure I don't drive this thing into a ditch. And there have been several times that I can think of that pop into my head right off the bat where I'm like, oh, I remember when they were just like, And I love that because, that's effectively the role that I played at the other startups that I was in. That's a super important role, is to not overreact, not overcorrect, not oversteer, right? That's part of the challenge. And I worked on that at Tesla, Beta, Dealer.com. All of those companies had billion-dollar, have became multi-billion-dollar entities. And so it's so critical, but to be able to rely on those folks, the experience level is just, it's mind-bogglingly good.
Right.
I want to say one more thing about this, and I'm so proud of that group because they're so active. We meet every other week. They meet every week, and they're constantly and some of them are working, effectively, half-time or even close to full-time, because they love it so much. And they give a lot to this mission across all their different areas of expertise, which is amazing. Like imagine being an engineer on a program and you're working on a given thing, landing gear, and you're doing a design review. We're sitting at the table as Press Henny, who has 4 or 5 Collier trophies from MD-80, MD-90, G650, G550. His team, he led that team that got the Collier trophy. Imagine being an aerodynamicist and being able to say, like, this guy who was in my textbook is now in this design review. It's so fun.
Right.
But that's the big blessing of this mission, is that it's not about any one person. It's about people really wanting to throw in and put their weight behind a future for the industry that they love, that continues to grow and continues to improve.
And I love that you shared so many names of people who have been pioneers already. This is not their first rodeo. They've done this before. And they're bringing all of this experience to help the JetZero team in something, I'm sure even an entry-level person at JetZero would be incredibly proud of working on. Still staying on the same course of the ecosystem you're working with, I would love for you to compare and contrast 2 relationships you've got. You've got Alaska Airlines, who has, I've seen the beautiful livery on the JetZero aircraft. Alaska Airlines Star Ventures has also invested in you, versus Delta Airlines, and you're working directly with the Delta Innovation Lab on the design of the plane. How do you work with both of these airlines, and how is it different?
Well, I'd like to say, first of all, that Alaska has a venture group, and they're very, very innovative. And so they understood that, it was time to get behind something that could provide a kind of solution that they're looking for, right? So they were concerned with sustainability, but they're also concerned with, what's our next airplane? And this came about at around the time of the merger with Hawaiian Airlines. So they're just very much on the wanting to be on the innovative cutting edge. Can't say enough about Alaska. In fact, we just hosted a broader group of them here at our hangar. Delta's perspective was, we know our customers and our operations really well, and we'd like to open up. We've already set up this thing called Sustainable Skies Lab. And we already have a kind of a format where we want to see other companies engage. So they're already working with Joby and Airbus, which are great companies. I know Joe Ben Beaver of Joby, and he's a phenomenal guy. And he's got a great company, and they're working on that. And then we become the third company in there that's announced. And their goal there is to put their whole team, tech ops, right, their sustainability group, and we met at their sustainability conference, right? They're so actively engaged, and they want to use their company as a resource. But beyond those two, that's great. Beyond those two, there's 15 global airlines that are part of our working group. And we are now meeting with them a couple of 3 times this year. We met with them twice last year. We expect to have at least 2 more meetings this year, possibly 3, where we really go through each of the fundamental aspects of the plane. And so we really want to make sure that we have the customer feedback before we get to the milestone of like, okay, here's the product, preliminary design, here's the critical design, PDR, CDR, those are the critical milestones from a design perspective. So all of those relationships are super, super important to us. And it's great. It's, that's the ultimate proof point
Right.
for the program is there's demand. We started with the supply side, had the Air Force help, and now the demand side is a full picture as well.
I'm curious, how does this relationship work? I'm familiar with, let's say, working on the Airbus A380 project about 10 years ago, that the A380 team specifically worked with customers like Emirates and Singapore Airlines in helping design the product, right? I don't believe Delta has placed a firm order for JetZero. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what's in it for Delta to be working with you without the order, or when does the order come in? How does that actually work, if you're able to share?
We'll have some order announcements to share with you shortly, but not able to announce orders that we've already taken yet, because those things take time and so forth. That momentum is building very rapidly, right? With Alaska being the first to publicly announce an investment and order in JetZero aircraft. And of course, these are conditional orders. A lot of people say, well, is it a real order? Well, what do you mean by that, right? It's conditional based as it should be, right? We have no interest in saying, if you want to call it a reservation, call it a reservation. We have no interest in sort of conflating what we're doing with the kind of an order that an Airbus would take on an A321. That's a firm order, like nobody's getting out of it. From our perspective, we understand that the conditions have to be met, right? We've got to fly a demonstrator. We've got to certify an aircraft. We've got to be able to produce within a certain window for a certain, there's and that's only the beginning, right? So there's all kinds of conditions that need to be met, but these demand signals are so strong, very important to investors, suppliers. It's important to everything. So that's where we are with the from an order perspective.
Fair enough.
And that's where the whole thing grows.
Yeah.
People, because ultimately it becomes a commodity in and of itself, right? Because everyone understands that, and this is why I think it's great for a new entrant, is you can't you can only build so many planes, right? Most companies, you're talking about only maybe a dozen planes in year one, right? So there will be some scarcity on who's flying this plane in the early, from 2030 to 2035. There will be a scarcity of those.
I want to build onto this working with airlines to talk about your passenger experience. Now, I can guarantee most of us have not been on a blended wing wide body plane. How's the passenger experience different? I mean, I'm guessing not all passengers will have a window seat, right? You'll have a virtual window. How does this actually work? You're sitting in a cabin as we speak.
I am. I'm sitting in our cabin mock-up. So one thing about it, I'm not going to show you the whole thing. We're still in a fairly secret zone on this, but um, here are the things that I can tell you. People are typically concerned because they're like, "Hey, the windows, etc." I'm in sort of the back of the plane, and I'm still looking out a window. There's still a window in front of me that I can see from here. So that's one thing. So there is a sense of, but 8-foot ceilings. I'm standing in the aisle, and I can't physically touch the the bin, and yet the bin has enough room to fit my bag and my personal items. So I don't have anything stuffed under my seat. I have my own dedicated space. There's 6 aisles to come down, so really you've got this ability to board the aircraft very much quicker than being stuck in a single aisle where every single person who moves too slow holds up the entire group behind them. In this plane, there's 6 aisles and you can move around. So we eliminate the pain points, I think is the thing about the cabin. And this is really what we see the airlines being so interested in. It's like they know what their pain points are. They know it's about the boarding time and the boarding experience. They know it's about, where's my bag going to go? That creates high anxiety. They know it's about like seat width. And, for our cabin, really every seat is an upgraded width regardless of class. So there's a lot to look forward to in a blended wing body space, but ultimately it's commodious, right? It's spacious. That's the whole beauty.
I can't wait for the space aspect of it. What about simple elements like galleys and restrooms and social areas? I remember when the A380 came out, people had reimagined this, or the upper deck of the 747. People had some wild ideas on what this could be. Have there been airline customers you've been working with on completely enhanced passenger experience in those aspects?
Well, it's funny, like, you have to do these design studies, and it's like it's always the 95th percentile male, which is 6'2" and 195 pounds, which that's me actually. So I'm always walking around the cabins. I work in the cabin. I've been in this cabin all morning long, taking meetings and so forth. Because I love to get a feel for it, and you spot new things. The longer you sit in it, the longer the more that you see. It's part of the process. Um, you won't have a lab that you hit your head anywhere. You will have labs that are PRM available from the get-go. We don't need the government to mandate that we're going to have a PRM. I think that's actually happening at some point, but we will have wheelchair accessible labs from the jump. The galley is a centralized concept where it's basically a hub within the cabin, and it'll give airlines the opportunity to change their method of service, right? To make it less of a, hey, we're pushing these carts down, and more of this service mentality. Every airline does that differently. I think every airline that's seen this has had this like reimagining of what the new space might enable for them.
Right. I
It
hear
really
you. I hear
fulfills
you.
it makes everything better.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly. Um, we spoke about fuel consumption. We spoke about engines. We spoke about customers and passenger experience. One aspect that is becoming increasingly important is the sustainability aspect. Beyond fuel reduction, what sort of environmental benefits does the top-mounted engine configuration offer in terms of everything from noise reduction to fuel? Are there other benefits?
yeah, so we think about emissions not just in terms of carbon, but it's carbon, noise, NOx, and SOx, right? So the nitrogen and sulfur dioxide emissions, and that's typically noise, NOx, and SOx are all at the airport level. So that's a community issue. That is actually a huge impediment to growth, right? If you ask the FAA, what's the big impediment to growth in the industry? Their answer is, well, it's the community issues, noise, NOx, and SOx. We have to lower the because people have this like, I mean, what happened in the 90s was we started to think that the future of aviation was going to be gate constrained. Remember this? Heathrow, we don't have enough gates at Heathrow. And where did it lead us? We need bigger A380, right? And that was a little bit of a false start, right? Because the A380 has been discontinued. So we thought that there was a problem. But what were they trying to address? They were trying to address infrastructure, airport problems. The big airport problems we get right now are noise, NOx, and SOx. So we're cutting all that in half right off the bat, which is fantastic. So that's, I think, probably one of the best things that we can say about the environmental issues in addition to the climate issue. Ultimately, all of these issues point towards growth impediments, right? It's all about how do we keep the industry on this growth trajectory? We got to deal with all those, sort of like negative externalities.
Right, I hear you. What about sustainable aviation fuel as well as hydrogen? How is the JetZero aircraft compatible and prepared for the future of these fuels?
Well, the future of I think of sustainable aviation fuel as like all future fuels, not just drop-in fuels, which would be your biofuels, your synthetic fuels, right? But all future fuels, which would include hydrogen, right? Which would include, in some sense, you could say electric. Although electric is a tough inlet until we get a magic battery. That's not going to work for 6,000 nautical mile flights or even 3,000 nautical mile flights. Can we be doing batteries at 1,000 nautical miles or less in the 2030s? Possibly, but probably for smaller planes, like Hart Aerospace is looking at, and others like Ampere is a kind of I like to think of them as a sister company. They're doing refurbs on like Caravans and King Airs, which I think is a phenomenal. It's like a very cost effective thing. All the way down to the eVTOLs, great. So electric is going to happen, but smaller scale. Question is, in the core of the market that the airlines are in, what's going to work? And that's going to be SAF and then on a pathway to hydrogen. So you really can't do hydrogen, just, brass tacks. This is why people are like, why did Airbus kill their Zero E program? Well, first, they're being honest. It's infrastructure. But second, it's not going to work on a tube and wing. Like, there's not enough volume. Why? Because you're not going to be able to get enough passengers or fuel to do anything more than, say, 1,200 nautical miles and 100 people. Like, it's more of a regional jet type of thing. So it's less interesting to the airlines themselves. On this plane, you could absolutely do hydrogen, but the same infrastructure applies. So then it comes back to what you're saying about SAF. Where does SAF play? Well, we know that SAF is constrained in terms of like feedstocks and like how much supply is there going to be to meet the demand. The assumption is there's going to be a lot of demand. That's going to be price dependent because the industry, again, can I go back to growth? The industry has grown over the past 20 years because prices have been kept down, right? The same or lower. Despite inflation, prices have basically stayed the same. And that is a huge source of growth for the industry. So now all of a sudden, if you boost the fuel cost and it costs 2x, 3x, 4x, what's going to happen to the growth? Like, I'm not an economist, but I think we can all see what the problem here is. And so once again here, JetZero is providing a solution, right? If we're lowering the fuel burn by 50%, that means that our plane can be a place that absorbs the input of SAF, right? Because, we can, and there's different ways, but some people look at it and say, oh, well, we'll just put SAF on your plane because then we're flying expensive SAF twice as many miles. And that sounds like a good proposition to folks. The other way to look at it is people say, well, you're getting the 50%. Great, check that box. Now we'll deploy SAF on the tube and wings where we're not getting 50%. And then, so again, I'm not the economist, but this is actually a solution because SAF on its own creates more of a problem than it solves, I think. But with our plane, it starts to be a nice little blend
You're
that
right.
works together, a
Very,
balance.
very, very interesting. I love the way you're thinking about that, about this. Now, now till 2030, when you intend to have your entry into service, hopefully, what do you see as the biggest challenges you need to overcome as a company?
Well, certainly certification is a great big challenge. And that's really the difference. If you look back and say, well, we believe because SpaceX and Tesla and Anduril and defense, like these are all category killing companies that they're doing it. And so when we look at that, certification is the biggest challenge. And that is the advisor that I forgot. Um, Steve Dixon was the FAA administrator. And he just joined us as an advisor. So he understands the path. We have four other people that used to work at the FAA that are essentially helping us navigate this process of certification, and we're going about it in a really cool way. But ultimately, it's the FAA that certifies you, not the other way around. So we have to conform the process, and the beauty of that process is there are no new regulations needed. It's a Part 25 aircraft, existing means of compliance. There's no new rules that need to be written in order for us to certify this aircraft.
Tom, what about competition? The best form of flattery is copying, I believe, and you have some competition rising not too far from you. What do you say to other competitors, and how do you deal with competition?
Uh, Good luck with that. Look, I think there are some interesting ones. I think imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Anybody who has the foresight and vision to say this is the future and I want to work on it, that's great. They have different paths than us. I think south of us is a company that's working on like an autonomous cargo plane first, and that's cool. North of us, there's another company that says they're going to 3D print a plane. Also cool. We look at that and say that's a long way off. So I think we're kindred spirits in a way, but I think what we have is the best path to a commercial future at scale. And those are the elements that we're working on. Ultimately, we need to build factories that can kick out hundreds of planes on an annual basis in order to make the impact that the airlines want for their customers and for the climate, and the impact that investors want, and the health that the suppliers are looking for in their business. We have to build this at volume. And that
Right.
requires, I think, the strategic path that JetZero has built upon and continues to work towards.
Do you intend to get to volume on your own, Tom, as well? Because we've seen others that are new to this field, like Archer, partner with someone like Stellantis, right? Or do you intend to partner when you actually are shipping out hundreds of airplanes?
I don't see us partnering with an automotive supplier. I think that does make sense for Archer. I think Adam and Nikhil and that team are doing some great things as well. And I'm watching that very closely because having worked in eVTOL, I was at Beta Technologies. I know them, and I'm watching very closely because I think the Stellantis thing is really really cool. So not the path for us though. The path for us is to work with the supply chain that we have, and that supply chain is robust. Working with RTX as we talked about before, we certainly wouldn't rule out a partnership with another uh, OEM if the right opportunity arose. We would certainly consider that. Being in a startup is really about keeping as many of your options open. But I think the most important partnership towards the factory, arguably, is the partnership we announced with Siemens at CES this year, where they're effectively saying we have an end-to-end software and automation all the way through to AI tool set that takes care of your digital design, your digital test and analysis, your digital twin, your digital thread, all the way through to the service side. And in the middle, don't forget, we're the world's leader in manufacturing automation. So when Siemens, they are, right, we're just a partner of theirs. But when they look at JetZero, they see this incredible opportunity to put their entire suite of tools behind what JetZero is doing and help us build the factory of the future and really the system of the future. That part is super, super exciting. So I think the supply chain is certainly excited about that. I wouldn't be surprised if other manufacturers are, and will, of course, weigh those opportunities.
Wow. I love all of the aspects that we have covered, Tom. And of course, anyone who's picking up our book will get much more in depth because we did a lot more interviews like with Mark Page and other members of your team as well. Final question. What gives you the most hope about the future of aviation?
Wow. What gives us the most hope about the future of aviation? Well, I mean, I don't want to be too self-reflective there and say JetZero. But okay, that's a really good question. I would say what gives me the most hope is the potential for growth, the potential for an even greater democratization of flight. Like it really has been. I mean, try to imagine the world without commercial aviation. Like it's just a completely different world. And really, when you think of the global population, there's only a small fraction of people who've been able to enjoy it. And so being able to spread that requires industry growth. And that's part of our mission because we feel that without using the ultra efficient aircraft, because of all the constraints on the business, we're going to plateau and maybe even decline if costs escalate. So that's the part of the hope. I really feel like it's hard for me to imagine being a human on the planet today and not being able to fly. And I think we're going to be part of that because I think we're going to have a plane that's going to cause people to say, look, up in the sky, it's a Z4, right? Like that part to me is the ultimate, that's what we're working for. That's what gets everybody up early in the morning and staying late at night to crank it out.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Tom. The final part of this interview is what I call the rapid fire round, in which we get to know you a bit more personally. So we're going to have that simple questions like, what's your favorite book?
I have Good to Great is the one that I've read the most times. I don't know why. I just always go back to it.
Good choice. Favorite movie?
True Romance.
Okay, I was expecting Top Gun, but sure, I'll take True Romance here. Favorite city?
Los Angeles right now.
Okay, and favorite airline? Do you have a favorite airline? How about a favorite airline?
Can't say.
Too many.
I love all the airlines.
All right. Politically incorrect question. What do you do in your free time?
I watch Premier League soccer. I'm a great big Liverpool supporter. Sorry to the Man U fans out there, but Liverpool is a storied history, and we're about to win the league.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also play. Signs of Misspent Youth. I play golf.
Okay. All right. What is something you'd like to learn?
Oh my gosh, there's so much I'd like to learn. That's actually why I'm here, because I really wanted to learn more and more and more about this particular part of the business. I really want to learn more about propulsion. So that's the beauty. I already feel like I got a PhD in aero working with Mark and Bob Liebeck and all these folks. So, yeah.
Okay. What is the best advice you've received?
The best advice I've received. Wow. Most recently, it was just about running. I did this podcast with a guy, and I was like, "How do we do this?" And he was just like, "You have to run when it hurts, not when you feel like running." And that's when you get to go. So I'm on my streak of running every day for a few weeks. And I got that all came from the advice. He's like, "You're going to run when you like to run, but the best advice I could give you is like, when it hurts, go run."
Wow.
And so that's, yeah. Because I told him, I'm like, I want to run, and he's like, "You got to run when it hurts."
Wow. Very, very fascinating advice. And how long do you run? What's the distance you do every day?
Oh, this is the fun part. I only run 1.1 miles.
Perfect. So you're not like pushing yourself, you're showing up every day.
No, I just run a mile, and then the point one is like I run as fast as I can for the point one, and that's it. And then I'm on with my day. It's like you knock it out as opposed to like making it this huge ordeal.
Okay.
But that's it. That's my recipe for happiness today is, run 1.1 miles.
Fantastic. I love it. I think we can end on this note with the final question. If we are speaking 1 year from today and we are popping champagne, what are we celebrating?
So 1 year today would be product PDR. That would mean that we've gone through our working group process and we have defined the JetZero Z4 product that is going to come to market. And when you see that design, you are going to want to pop the champagne too.
Wow. Okay. I'm looking forward to that moment. Tom, all the best for that milestone as well as many others that we have discussed today. And thank you for joining us from this beautiful cabin mock-off of yours. Can't wait to see this take flight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simpliflying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our Supervising Editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Meera Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Dreamen is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.